Hello and welcome to today's webinar on building a business case for direct sourcing. I'm delighted to be joined by our expert panelists, Mike Lacey, Chief Sales Officer and Executive Vice President at Raise, and Derek Sanders, Chief Revenue Officer at Opley. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. It's really great to have you here on today's webinar. And of course, a warm welcome to everyone who's joining us today. Thank you so much for your support and thanks for your interest in what we're going to be discussing today. Mike, what is direct sourcing?
Well, Connor, thanks for the loaded question to get things off and started. I think it's a great question to kick it off because I think it will provide a kind of a foundation for the rest of the discussion. There really has been so many different versions of what direct sourcing is, so I'll try and give it a shot. I personally define direct sourcing as when a company leverages its employer brand to attract and curate a private database of contracted candidates that are organized really into talent pools. Direct sourcing provides gains in efficiency, productivity, and economies of scale, really as compared to that kind of that transitional or reactive way of recruiting for contingent roles. Also, when you really think about it, it's just easier to connect employers with candidates who are interested in working for them when they engage in the brand. Another approach was taken by SIA a few years ago, and they kind of defined three versions of direct sourcing, which have really matured over the last 10 years. And, I think using these versions will also help us with parts of this discussion. So version one, we kind of all agree, kind of the first genesis, which is pre-ID'd or payroll services referred candidates that really come in from both either workers or hiring leaders. Version two is now we start to get into what direct sourcing is, the more the proactive piece, curated candidate talent pools, leveraging the employer brand, and using a technology as a platform to be able to do all of those things. And version three, where some of the companies are today, which is using data to really make those decisions, forecasting, curation of talent pools, using different omni channels to source candidates and attract candidates, and really using kind of advanced practices like AI matching, SMS and texting, etc.
Mike, what is curation? Could you just explain that for the benefit of our audience?
Connor, you're giving me all the loaded questions up front here. So first it's direct sourcing. Now I got to do curation. So I'll try and give you what I think is my definition. But let me first by saying, I was at an SIA conference a few years back, and one of the keynote speakers was on stage, and they kind of made this following comment: curation and recruiting are pretty much the same thing. And I was kind of sitting back going, I don't think so. I might agree that there may be a few similarities, but I think they're actually quite different. So my definition of curation, it's really the process of selecting and organizing potential candidates proactively in a client-specific talent pool. When we draw candidates into that talent community, we nurture them through talent curation. When I look at recruitment's really the process of sourcing, evaluating, interviewing, and hiring candidates, really often after the hiring need is presented. So really one's proactive curation and the other is reactive recruitment. With direct sourcing, curators do not seed their own staffing company's ATS database. And it's not for their benefit, but they're building an asset for the client. And I think that's really important for contingent program leaders to know that a good curator is focused on them and them only. Number two, with direct curators, curators work exclusively for the direct sourcing client. They're not working for other clients' requirements at the same time. That's typically what a staffing recruiter will do. They'll look at all the different roles that come in and work on the easiest or closest to money. Number three, with direct sourcing, curators regularly connect with content that keeps candidates interested and informed of what's really going on with the client. Essentially, really keeping candidates warm and ready to go when a role is released. And all of that, as I keep mentioning, it requires great technology like Opley to make it easy to be able to connect and engage with those candidates.
Really, if I think about having a world-class experience, almost direct sourcing and curation is a no-brainer. Is that fair to say, gents?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think it's about identifying the opportunities that they're qualified for, right? And it's about understanding, right, the goal of the curation partner and I don't want to speak for Mike here, but is to really understand that client, really adopt the brand of that client, right? What's the soft skills? What differentiators for working there? It's about capturing those key things that makes it different than a traditional just staff firm. And staffing firms serve a great purpose, but really that curation partner is so important because they're using the brand voice of that organization. The other thing that I always think about is like, what do you want the candidate experience to be, right? If they see a ton of jobs, like you had that experience, I get those experiences too, right? You'd be great for a sales intern. I'm like, I would be. Yeah, you're right. But not really that part of my life right now, right? So, but that candidate experience, which is really kind of, it's allowing curation team as well as a hiring manager to look and see what the nearest relevancy score, but also for candidates, you don't want to surface jobs that they're not qualified for. Yes, you have a career page and those things, but proactive reaching out, which is part of direct sourcing, you want to make sure that you feel like you're being seen, that you are being recognized for your success and your skills that you develop over years of experience, and ultimately how are you being reached out to for those qualified roles is so important.
Derek, how do you see the appetite and the model for direct sourcing changing?
Yeah, I think that a lot of companies have tried direct sourcing, right? We all know that we see the RFPs, we see all the things that come up. So I think Gen 2, Gen 3 programs are going to look very different, right? One of the ways I think that direct sourcing has traditionally been all EOR or W2 in the US, PAYE in the UK, which is our great workers, right? You have a lot more control around those things. But I do think that the rise of independent contractors with companies like CXC that are ultimately providing the back office solutions for independent contractors and statement of work workers, well, you're missing out on highly qualified workers. These are the people that have set up their own business because they're experts in their field. And I think that if you're a smart, educated buyer, yes, there's risk with independent contractors, but that's why you have a provider like CXC, where ultimately it ties them together, it mitigates that risk, and they take on that risk themselves. The next part I think is really around the question of AI. As a proprietary AI company, I think that I'm coming from a biased place. But what I would say is I have not seen one RFP or one QBR where they're not asking, what's your approach to AI? What's your approach to those things where, questionnaires are being handled, like data security, candidate privacy, all those things factor into how are you leveraging AI? And I think that that's a question that you have to answer for your clients is what's your approach?